The majority of people walking around with metabolic ill health, they don't have any signs or symptoms. They feel fine. I was not aware of low carb in 2013 when I got pre-diabetes. I was eating a lot of carbs, actually, and that had been my food pattern for more than 3 decades. I just wasn't aware. Being an endocrinologist did not teach me about a low carb way of life. If you start dropping your carbs, upping your protein, within a week, I see improvements. And within 2 weeks, not just glucose levels improving, but energy levels are going up. They feel less bloated, less puffy. And this we know is insulin resistance lowering, the water retention reversing itself. And this water that's under the skin in the wrong place, that starts to get corrected as they up the protein. Within 2 weeks, they're beginning to feel a lot better. I wasn't this doctor 20 years ago. I was part of that system. I was part of that training. I was part of that machine that says 1 tablet, 2 tablet, 3 tablets, 4, finally insulin. And it was only a certain combination of life circumstances in my life that gave me this chance to open my eyes. And thankfully, I did.
As somebody's becoming metabolically unhealthy, insulin resistant, what are the first signs and symptoms?
You know, Jesse, I'm really glad you asked me that because the majority of people walking around with metabolic ill health, they don't have any signs or symptoms. They feel fine. And that's one of the catches about this is we may have to go screen for it even when someone feels absolutely fine. But maybe some things to think about is if there's a bit of difficulty losing that belly fat or weight around the midsection that just refuses to go, or feeling tired all the time, or noticing that you're just putting on weight doing the exactly same thing. These would be some signs. Of course, if you have family history, these are reasons to go looking for it. But I don't want people waiting for signs and symptoms of it, actually.
All right. And when you say go looking for it, what does that mean?
That means going for blood tests. So meet your doctor, ask them to just do your general health checkup, maybe at least once a year. In India, you know, I've worked in the US and in India, and anybody of Indian origin, we should be checking them, I'd say, above the age of 25. Even if you're perfectly healthy, we should just get you checked and make sure, because we're seeing type 2 diabetes and metabolic disease in younger and younger adults, actually in teenagers and kids too. So we really do need to keep a high antenna, go see the doctor, get a fasting glucose, fasting insulin, a hemoglobin A1C, and we can talk about more metabolic tests to look at the liver and things like that, uric acid, your lipid panel. So there's a lot of clues and signals to know that someone's heading into metabolic ill health.
You mentioned something there, well, alluded to something. In India, the standard being a bit different, it sounded like. I think you said age 25 and beyond. Why is that? What's the difference there?
I feel like, and we know this, that Asian or South Asian people are at higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes or metabolic syndrome than Caucasians are. And like I said, 25 is really an arbitrary number, but honestly, every young person of Indian origin should get checked. The minute they start thinking about, I want to make sure I'm healthy, they should just go get checked. Because like I was saying, we do see this in even teenagers and kids. So, but we think there might be some genetic predisposition to it in terms of maybe the Asian countries being warmer, tropical climates. There really never was a harsh, prolonged winter for large parts of the Indian subcontinent. And maybe they didn't have to store food or store energy in so much belly fat. So what we see is Indians or South Asians can get metabolically sick, even though they may not be as overweight as their Caucasian counterparts. So for a smaller inches on the waistline, they could be very metabolically sick on the inside.
Let's go under the hood now and talk about the physiology. As somebody's creeping into this continuum of insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, all the way to type 2 diabetes, early on, what's happening?
If I could take a step back, Jesse, my work involves hormones, and, our degree is called diabetes, hormones, and metabolism. And we throw around the word hormone a lot, but it's important to talk about this hormone insulin because, everybody understands what diabetes is. It means, oh, my blood sugar is high. But years and years before that, when we're progressing towards metabolic syndrome, it could just be simple obesity, simple weight gain, which it looks like on the outside. But you could even be either overweight or normal weight and have your insulin levels creeping up. And that's something you may not know. But why would insulin levels creep up? If you could get the job done with normal insulin, why would the body make it creep up? Clearly, there's something in the body's cells that are not allowing insulin to do its job. And, we talk a lot about environmental pollutants also. So you could say a combination of lifestyle factors, environmental factors, so many external factors, plus the genetic risk that you might have as an individual. All of these things can make insulin function start to get, ineffective. And then the body's trying harder and harder to prevent you from getting diabetes. So to keep normal glucose levels, the body has to use more and more insulin.
Okay, let's talk about what's changing with the cell. Get right into the nuance here. That is causing this insulin to go up and for things to break.
Right. So maybe I should explain in one sentence. Insulin's a master metabolic hormone. We all need it. And so much in the media about insulin resistance, we start thinking insulin's bad for us. We need insulin to stay alive. It's a very essential hormone. In fact, not having it can give you the life-threatening condition called type 1 diabetes. And people with type 1 diabetes need to be given insulin to keep them healthy. So insulin's a very important hormone. What does it do? We eat our food and then it gets digested by our gut. Now, digestion is one part, but once it enters the bloodstream, it's not meant to only float around in the bloodstream. It needs to get inside the cells. Insulin is the hormone that helps you store the energy, store the fat inside the cells. It turns on and off so many important metabolic process. So it tells the body, food has come in, store fat, store fuel, store energy. Let's keep this inside your cells for a rainy day. And that's how it should work normally, that once you've eaten, insulin helps park that energy in the cells. And when you're not eating or you face energy shortage or famine or starvation periods, which our hunter-gatherer ancestors faced often, we thankfully don't, at least the people listening to this call. And then when you face food shortage, insulin levels would fall low. And then that stored fuel can come out. So insulin is doing this sort of on-off or up-down regulation so that energy can go in and out of the cells gracefully.
Okay, so becomes problematic then when we're taking in too much energy in the form of carbs, blood glucose goes up, insulin's trying to get that into cells. But if we're not giving the body a break in between meals, or we're having too many carbs, insulin needs to be produced on a greater level to be able to handle that glucose. Talk about that process when that goes awry.
Yes, an analogy that people will understand, because to be very honest with you, even though I'm an endocrinologist, I've never looked at a molecule of insulin or a molecule of glucose with my naked eye. Right? We talk about it in this invisible format. So Jason Fung, he's a well-respected nephrologist, kidney doctor in Canada, and he explained this in a very simple way and it helped so many people turn their lives around. He explains a picture of a Tokyo crowded train station. And I've spent more than half my life in India. And in India and Tokyo also, you see these very crowded train stations, trains at rush hour packed with people. And in Tokyo, the doors actually close. In India, you have trains with no doors. So people are like dangling out, hanging out the train, holding on to the pole for dear life. But in Tokyo, the example he uses, he shows you how the door is trying to close, but some commuters are trying to still make it inside the train. And so there are people on the train station whose job is to push these passengers into the train. They're literally forcing, they have uniforms on, they have gloves on. Their job is to push these commuters into the train so the train can close. So the analogy is that the passengers trying to get on are the glucose molecules or your energy molecules, fuel molecules trying to get into the cell. The cell is already full. It's rush hour. The train is full. The cells are overfilled because we have overabundance of nutrition. And insulin is these employees on the train station pushing, smashing these people inside the train or in our body, smashing the glucose or the fuel into the cells, trying hard.
Okay, let's take it even further. So insulin's driving this glucose in, cells already full, but there's extra glucose in the bloodstream that it's trying to deal with. Mm-hmm. What happens eventually with those cells and then in the rest of the body as this ramps up?
Exactly. And this is why we consider, for example, type 2 diabetes, type 2 diabetes is like the master sort of poster child of what is insulin resistance. When it goes bad, the most obvious disease that we can measure easily is type 2 diabetes, which is high blood glucose, even though you have high insulin. Why do we talk about diabetes in such a big way? Because we know it affects the entire body. You can have damage and organ disease, complications from head to toe. Why is that? Because glucose goes into every cell. Insulin works on every cell. So now imagine that every single cell in the body has been exposed to excess glucose, high insulin going on for years because of a lifestyle and everything, that contributes to insulin not working well. Now you're looking at damage in all these organs. So RI in the brain can be, now we're talking about Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, neurodegenerative diseases, strokes. You look at the eyes, you're looking at loss of vision, you're looking at high blood pressure, looking at carotid blockages, heart attacks, of course, the diabetes, and then even in your feet, the complications, sexual health gets affected, and all kidney failure. So your fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver causing liver failure. I could go on and on with the kinds of complications that come from every single cell, even gut health and bad digestion. We don't realize joint pain, arthritis, inflammation, non-healing of the body. High insulin was never meant to be how we were supposed to be. We were supposed to have nice, beautiful, easy insulin on, off, and have this graceful fluid movement of fuel in and out of the cells. But this is where insulin resistance gets RI.
Let's move into the liver. You mentioned it quickly there. This is a big organ when it comes to insulin resistance, getting fatty. Talk about specifically what's happening there as we have all this glucose, all this increased insulin.
The liver is not supposed to store fat. It stores glycogen, and it is your continuous provider of glucose into the body. And I talk about, it's not my idea, it's from another published paper about the authors talk about 3 musketeers of glucose metabolism. The liver is the glucose provider. What this means is even when you're fasting, you've not eaten for, let's say, days, your blood glucose would stay stable. Why? Because your liver is continuously doing gluconeogenesis. After a while, even your kidneys can help with this, but initially it's your liver doing gluconeogenesis. It's making new glucose out of fat, protein, anything, stored carbohydrates. So you don't need to eat carbohydrates. Your liver is constantly managing glucose levels to keep them steady. And that's what a healthy liver does. Now, when this fuel excess is coming in, especially when we take in sugar, fructose, processed food that has, sweetened beverages that have sucrose being glucose plus fructose, or lots of fruits, fruit juices, again, high fructose, this is very toxic to the liver. And you'll find that the combination of high insulin, high fructose on the liver creates a very problematic situation of fat accumulation inside the liver. That's not supposed to happen. Even small amounts of fat getting stuck in the liver causes the liver to get diseased. You'll start to see your liver enzymes go up, which is your SG. In India, we call it SGOT or SGPT. In America, it's called ALT and AST. And you'll start to see these numbers climb. And Robert Lustig, he's a very well-known pediatric endocrinologist. He talks about how normal reference range of what these liver enzymes should be has almost like doubled or tripled over the last generation, because as a population, we've taken in so much carbohydrates and sugar, processed food, that liver enzymes are creeping up, and fatty liver is almost becoming normal. It's not normal in the body, but it's becoming so common in society, like they're beginning to call it normal. And I've seen radiologists do this where, oh, you have grade 1 fatty liver. I'm not even going to put it in the report because everybody has that. And it's very bad for us to be accepting this because it's overtaking alcoholic liver disease as a cause of liver failure. So it's a big problem.
All right, let's move over to the pancreas. This is where the insulin is made. What happens as all this is going on? Insulin production is ramped up. We're bombarding the body with the glucose and the insulin. Talk about it specifically in that organ.
Yes. Now, in the context of type 2 diabetes, whether you have a lot of inches accumulating in terms of weight gain around the belly or just minor weight gain, if you have a lot of visceral fat, which means you could be thin on the outside and fat on the inside, or you could have a large amount of inches on the waistline, either way, There could be fat inside the abdomen where it doesn't belong. So it doesn't belong in the liver. It doesn't belong in excess amounts in and around the organs inside our belly cavity. It's not supposed to be there beyond that normal amount. This will then start even infiltrating into the pancreas. And now radiologists are beginning to notice this and pay attention to it, is fatty pancreas. Same concept. You should not be storing fat inside the pancreas. The normal place to store fat should be below our skin, subcutaneous fat. That's where we keep it for those, famine periods or starvation periods, and it moves in and out of the, storage sites from below the skin. That's what we would call maybe cellulite, right? That's where it's actually metabolically safer than being inside the belly. Now, fat inside the pancreas is toxic. It starts to damage the pancreas, especially as far as an endocrinologist is concerned, the tail of the pancreas, the tip of the pancreas, which is the part that actually makes this important hormone called insulin. So over time, if someone has had insulin resistance, your pancreas, it's like putting someone through overtime, and giving them no breaks. The pancreas can burn out, and the insulin provision or the production of insulin starts to drop and fail. Now, this could take someone who's had years of type 2 diabetes doing okay on tablets. Suddenly you'll find the doctor's like, oh, tablets aren't working. We need to put you on insulin. Now, we could be making a clinical mistake there if we don't actually test the blood to confirm that this is a burnt out pancreas. And I talk about this kind of a patient at the very beginning of my book, where I assumed his pancreas had failed and he just wouldn't go on insulin. So I had to do other things. Turns out his pancreas had not failed. But back then in my practice, I wasn't testing for this. But his pancreas was actually willing to, come back online in a healthier way once he changed his lifestyle and made the right amount of insulin so that he didn't have to go on insulin injections. But the pancreas can get damaged just the same way as any other organ and can start to fail to make enough insulin.
And does that ever get to a point, I assume it does, where you can't reverse it?
Yes. And the test you would do to know that is a C-peptide test, a fasting C-peptide. Again, this is where, Jesse, I want your audience to know is we as endocrinologists are supposed to be the experts in diabetes. We're the highest trained doctors when it comes to diabetes management. But there was something very compartmentalized about my education, or at least maybe I missed it in class, but I don't see my colleagues doing this as well, is we used the C-peptide test when we thought we were dealing with type 1 diabetes. We never used it when clinically deciding whether this person with type 2 diabetes needs to be put on insulin or not. We never used the C-peptide test there. And now that I use it, I find I'm able to have this conversation with my patients is we might have thought, had I not tested, we might have thought, oh, your pancreas is permanently damaged and that's why your blood sugars aren't responding to tablets. But it turns out your pancreas is still very much in the game. It's fighting for you. It's trying to help. It's putting out insulin over time. It's trying so well to support you, but the lifestyle is not supporting the pancreas. So let's talk about what you can do in your lifestyle to help your pancreas out to give you those normal glucose levels without me having to put you more and more tablets and finally insulin. This is a very important conversation to help that patient have hope is, you know what, my pancreas, maybe it's getting a bit weak. And if I turn things around now, I might be able to bring it back from the edge and avoid unnecessary prescriptions.
So on the most basic level, what we've talked about so far, we're putting too many carbs, too many sugars in the body. The blood glucose is going up, insulin's going up, trying to get rid of the glucose, trying to jam it in cells. They're full. Organs are becoming fatty. Basically, there's an energy surplus and the body's trying to store it any way it can. And this becomes problematic when it starts to put fat into things like the liver, into the pancreas. And over time, we're just slowly breaking the body.
Yes. And it's coming from, and some people get offended almost is, what do you mean I'm eating too much? I eat little bits. I eat small, frequent meals. That's what my dietitian or my nutritionist has told me, or my doctor has told me is I need to eat small, frequent meals. I'm just nibbling through the day. What we don't realize is we're constantly in this rising insulin situation in the body. And the body's looking for whether insulin levels are rising or falling. It's only when insulin levels are falling that we would be able to mobilize that stored fat. But we eat from the moment we open our eyes, we eat till late into the night, we go into midnight snacking when we can't sleep. There are so many situations where we're putting things in our mouth. The body is constantly being told, and that's why insulin is constantly trying to store fuel, and we're just not giving enough time on the reverse, which is why the concept of time restricted eating, intermittent fasting has become so popular, is we have to actually prescribe breaks from eating now.
And you touched on this, but I want to go a bit deeper. The fact that this is so systemic. We're obviously talking about different organs, so we've, alluded to it there, but the fact that when we're doing this to the body and insulin has been elevated for a prolonged period of time, it can affect things like cancer, obviously diabetes, dementia. It's far reaching throughout the whole body. And that's why looking at this in its most fundamental form, like you're maybe taught in school as an endocrinologist, diabetes, that's just one offshoot. This extends throughout the whole body, this metabolic health and broken metabolism.
It does. And, somebody might say, but if insulin's so good for us, then why is more of it bad? And I think we need to understand that insulin is a short lasting hormone. It actually, once you release it into the bloodstream, it can be in and out of your system within minutes. It's supposed to be short acting. It's not supposed to be chronically high all the time. You hear about cortisol. We talk about the stress hormone cortisol. Again, another life-saving hormone. If your body is not making enough, we have to give it to you to keep you alive. But too much cortisol for too long was not part of the original blueprint of how this body is supposed to use cortisol. We were supposed to have bursts of cortisol when there was stress, and then cortisol levels would settle back down again. And if you have too much for too long, like chronic stress, you see so many conditions that happen or diseases that can set in from chronic high cortisol. So the idea to understand here is insulin by itself isn't bad, but we need to look at the lifestyle that's constantly driving up insulin. And, we talk a lot about nutrition, and that's the most powerful thing to do to start giving us a break from high insulin. But there are so many other things we can do to help get that relief from constant high insulin levels.
And to me, it seems like, and I'm curious if you agree, that the body is only left with this one option, and it's doing what it can to save us. There's all this extra energy. It can't just magically make it disappear. It needs to start tucking it away and dealing with it. So to look at our body like it's doing something wrong, I don't think that's right.
You're absolutely right. Insulin's trying to help. And sometimes, and I'm really happy you brought this up, is what does it do in our mind? I don't want someone to feel like a victim of their body, right? Is why are my hormones doing this? And sometimes patients come to me because their doctor, other specialists have said, your weight gain is hormonal. It's hormonal. Go see an endocrinologist. And then they'll come and they're like, is my weight gain hormonal? Well, yes, it's hormonal, but that's not because your hormones are being mean to you or being nasty or, being against you. They are working for you and they are responding to choices. Now, this is not to blame somebody. I don't want anybody listening to feel like this is blame. I'm actually saying it in an empowerment, frame of context is if it is something that is happening in your life, that means you do have the ability to step in and change it. We're not a victim of our hormones. Sure, there might be challenges and there might be difficult situations where I don't have the luxury of just snapping my fingers and changing who I am or my external, difficulties. But knowledge can help us look at things differently. And within that same challenging situation, I might get more ideas if I realize so much is in my hands and I'm not passive to this problem.
Basically, what we're saying here is that we're responding, our body's responding to the inputs we're giving it. And what we need to do through conversations like this is provide the knowledge so people have an opportunity to make different choices about those inputs that lead to the disaster we've been talking about.
Yeah. And the worst thing is, if I meet somebody who's had type 2 diabetes or struggled with weight for 2 decades, right? And then we suddenly meet and they're like, I wish somebody had told me this. Why didn't anybody tell me this before? That's what I don't want to happen. But to be honest with you, Jesse, before 2013, Even the people now who say, I wish I'd met you 20 years ago, I wasn't this doctor 20 years ago. I was part of that system. I was part of that training. I was part of that machine that says 1 tablet, 2 tablet, 3 tablets, 4, finally insulin. And it was only a certain combination of life circumstances in my life that gave me this chance to open my eyes. And thankfully I did. Now, I think everybody deserves that chance. Is let's bring the information, those situations to your audience, and hopefully it can give them that chance to not have to wait and be in more and more years of looking for the answers. Because you can tell, I'm like, something's not right. I don't feel right. I don't feel like my health is on the right track. I'm trying to do what they're telling me to do, but I just don't get the results. And that frustration can go on for many people in silence for years.
Well, let's go a bit deeper into your story. You touched on it, but what we've been talking about, you have personal experience with that. You were actually pre-diabetic at one point.
Yes.
So talk about the diet and lifestyle that led you there, finding that out, and what you did to get to where you are today.
Thank you for bringing that up. I do want to disclose that in my book so that people know that, I'm not preaching from some perfect pedestal. I've been there, and maybe I didn't get so severely sick, but I was on the journey to that, and I just didn't want that to be my outcome. But what happened was, and I have to be very honest, I was not aware of low carb in 2013 when I got pre-diabetes. I was eating a lot of carbs, actually, and that had been my, food pattern for more than 3 decades. I just wasn't aware. Being an endocrinologist did not teach me about a low carb way of life. What came up was in 2013, I was going through multiple inputs of stress, and we had moved from the US to India. I was taking time personally, professionally to adjust to this new life, and I was struggling to cope. And a series of, problems just came up, and 2013 was my year to be maximally stressed out, and my HbA1c reached 6.3. And I didn't have knowledge of until then how to manage my negative thoughts, negative thinking, or deal with the fact that the world's not giving me what I want, and I'm done being unhappy. So am I going to keep insisting for the world to not, for the world to dance to my music, or am I going to change what I can change? So that was my transition point. I wouldn't say that I magically went into low carb straight after that, but I did change my thinking patterns, my stress. So my chronic stress started to get better. I started exercising, and slowly from 2014 onwards, as this patient was also in my life, I started applying low carb in my own life and realizing and connecting more dots. So there was a whole awakening period that happened from 2013 and over the coming years to now. I went ahead and became a personal trainer. I got trained in multiple forms of meditation. I got trained in mindful eating and emotional eating and helping people heal their relationship with food and with their body, because I realized negative self-talk, negative beliefs, limiting beliefs can really affect behaviors. And I was all about behavior change and in diabetes. And all these learnings just started to come together where I wanted to really help people change, at least the ones who want to change or who've decided, I need a guide. I want to change and I need a guide. I always hope that I could be that guide for whoever is looking for that help.
So we've talked about the stress piece, but I want to go deeper into this. And this was part of your story. I think it's easy enough through our explanation there for people to understand when it comes to diet, how it can lead to this metabolic disruption. But let's talk about physiology-wise stress and its connection to insulin resistance.
Yes. Cortisol, again, being a good friend of ours, it's an important hormone. It's the stress hormone that we know of. And the mistake people make is they'll go do a blood test for cortisol levels and to check, oh, I'm so stressed. Let me show it to my family that look how much stress they're giving me. See, it's in my blood test. It's not like that. It's not easy to measure stress on a blood test. So when you're testing cortisol, you're really testing for disease states, but stress in itself, raising cortisol, may not reach disease levels of cortisol that can be captured on a blood test. But you could still be having all the harms and damages of chronic stress even before it's showing up on high cortisol in the blood. What do I mean by that? What does cortisol do? Cortisol normally its job is to briefly, if you're running from a tiger, right? Now it's not a tiger anymore. It's that boss, or it's that promotion, or it's that loan that I'm defaulting on, or my relationship, or something that's not working for me and the world's not giving me, and it doesn't go away. I carry those tigers in my head wherever I go, right? And so this, I'm not letting go of my foot from the accelerator. I'm just smashing down on cortisol, cortisol, cortisol. Now, short-term cortisol is life-saving. It bursts you into a brief burst of energy, gives you a burst of glucose. Why? Because you're clearly in a fight, flight, fright mode. There's something very difficult happening. There's an avalanche coming at you, a tiger coming at you, or you're chasing your next meal and you need to capture it. So you need that burst of energy and that surge of glucose that comes in to help your muscles get that extra, energetic jump, or that energetic, attack, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And that usually lasts for just seconds or minutes at the most. We're not really marathoners in terms of doing these life survival exercises. It's supposed to be brief. And in brief situations, the cortisol situation works. But not letting go of the accelerator on cortisol, now you're looking at high blood pressure, depression, high glucose, diabetes, bone loss, ulcers in the stomach. There's so many things, skin getting weak and thin and papery, bruising. There's just too many problems that can come from high cortisol just because we're chronically stressed. Difficulty losing weight too.
All right, let's come back to the diet. The biggest lever we have here. Again, it's probably pretty obvious the foundation we need to work at here. We've been talking about carbs and sugar, so we need to bring those down. But what does that look like practically?
Yeah, so Jesse, my population oftentimes is protein deficient, and I make sure to know that before I start giving them diet advice. Is I want their diet recall. I mean, in my first meeting with them, I ask them what they're eating. My team and I, we ask them what they're eating verbally. And then after that, they start logging their food into our app so that we're not just imagining what they're eating and giving advice hypothetical. We're giving on the ground feedback to their actual choices that they've had in the last 7 days. And it doesn't have to be perfect food or clean food. We're like, you're eating, you're in the world making these decisions. You're attending that party, you're going for that work conference, you're traveling, you're eating from an airline plate of airplane food. These are your realities, right? So log those, because whether you tell it to me or not, your body is anyway having to process this food. So let's start with your reality. And I have the app. So the app will count their carbs and their proteins. I specifically don't have them count their fats because I'm okay with natural healthy fats. But I want them to know their carbs and proteins. What I find, and I show them, is look, you're not reaching your daily requirement. And I aim for much more than the 0.8. I aim for, as long as someone has healthy kidneys, I'm asking them to first increase their protein to at least 1.2 grams of protein per kilo body weight. And I do that first because a lot of times when people come in and they think they're going to get diet advice, they're afraid that someone's going to take my food away. And I'm chronically hungry. I'm weak. I'm feeling tired. If they take away my food, I'm going to be more hungry, weak, and tired. So they're, almost resisting before I even say anything. So I help reassure that fear. I'm saying, I'm not taking any food away. I'm asking you to eat more protein. At breakfast, lunch, and dinner, try and get 25 grams of protein as soon as you start the day, at lunch, at dinner. See how you feel. And then based on how hungry you still are, then you can dial down those carbs, because everybody starts complaining. I'm so full. It's so hard to eat so much protein because they've been so used to getting, honestly, when I count for them, they're getting about 25 to 30 grams. Some of them maybe 50 grams or 60 grams of protein a day, but very few are above that on day one when they meet me. And so they're so used to being undernourished on protein and hungry all day from high carb that they're surprised at how full they feel when they suddenly get enough protein. So that makes it easier for me to talk to them about reducing carbs.
Okay, so first step, upping the protein, 25 grams per meal. How long does that first phase last before you start adjusting carbs?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. So I deal with a lot of vegetarian leaning people. The Indian culture, even if people say they eat animal protein, a lot of them are not eating it every day. They might eat it twice a week for religious reasons or cultural reasons, availability, financial reasons, so many reasons. And so when I count their intake, they sometimes are so low and vegetarian predominant, making that switch up to getting enough for the vegetarian people sometimes takes up to 2 months. And they start complaining of maybe some digestive changes. They were used to having, let's say, lots of fiber in their vegetables, and they might be reducing some of the carby fibers. And then they say their gut habits have changed. So we have to settle that down. And then there's a psychological resistance to protein in my population, at least in the Indian community. There's a lot of fear around protein. They're worried about their kidneys and uric acid, not justified with any science, but this fear is quite present in the community. So I have to deal with that. And if you're going to stay vegetarian, I then have to talk to you at some point about maybe you need a protein supplement. And then there's a lot of pushback they get often in the house is, well, why are you taking all these fake powders and things like that? And I'm like, sure, whole food first. If you take animal protein, you probably won't need the protein shakes, but on a vegetarian predominant. So these are the conversations we have to navigate, negotiate, and they need to be able to apply it in their life. And I don't give out a diet plan because honestly, in my own family of four, my husband and two daughters, four of us could have four different choices for how we like to eat our meals. And we don't have the exact same preferences. So I don't assume that I can prescribe one diet plan that's going to work for all clients. We need to reverse engineer this from their kitchen, their daily life. Can they cook? Do they have help? Are they eating out? Are they traveling? And it has to be a dynamic skill that we teach them. So it can take time. My long answer for your question is, it takes time because we're helping them build solutions rather than shortcut, short-term diets that last for just a few weeks as long as their motivation lasts. But then when life gets difficult, they have to throw the diet off because it's too challenging.
Okay. So it's a longer process, gentle. Is there an end goal with carbs, a number you like to see people get down to?
Yeah, so if they're going to stay vegetarian, then I'm able to help them achieve their results if they can stay in an 80 to 100 gram carb range. I've seen some low carb communities say less than 130 or 120. I find that when there are vegetarian proteins, being 80 to 100, a little bit lower than what we call the upper limit of low carb, not so low into the keto range because for vegetarians, it gets very limiting and restrictive. There aren't a lot of natural Indian foods that are keto friendly or keto compliant, especially in the vegetarian world. So I want to help them build something they can sustain, right? It's not just a flash in the pan diet for 2 weeks. This has to be something they can live with forever as a long-term plan. So we go gentle. With 80 to 100 grams of carb a day, most of my patients and clients find they're mentally satisfied, they're happy, it fits with their, family life, social life. They're able to balance eating out sometimes, having a dessert sometimes, a fruit sometimes, a bread or a rice or a grain once in a while, and still get those metabolic results. I might need to add intermittent fasting, but we sort of cross that bridge when it comes.
Okay. For somebody that is open to animal protein, you mentioned ketosis. How do you feel about including animal proteins for that person and then getting the carbs down to a point where they're in a ketogenic state?
Yeah, we do that. So as long as the person is fine with animal protein, again, this is all patient or client driven. We check their preferences first. If they're fine with animal protein, it's by far a much superior protein. And we agree hands down. Definitely my patients who are open to it, the ones who go animal only, they achieve their results much faster and the struggle is minimal. The ones who are vegetarian are the ones who struggle more. But that's not to say that anybody deserves to, keep struggling. It just might take a little longer. But yes, the people who go animal route, they achieve their results much faster. And I may not have them be testing the ketone strips, but when we count their carbs, they're below 50 because if you're eating only animal protein, you're automatically easily into ketosis just by doing that. And they feel great. Their energy turns around in about 2 weeks. max. I haven't seen anybody need longer than that. Honestly, it starts to happen as early as 3 to 5 days. You'll see a very drastic change. And then they feel so good on that plan, they don't like getting out of it because their body gives them very quick feedback. So, yes, those who are open, we definitely want to support them on that journey.
Okay, you said animal only. Are you talking about carnivore?
I have two Indian patients that are carnivores. I've met a colleague now, an emergency room physician from India, from New Delhi, who's a carnivore. So the carnivore community in India is growing. There are a few fitness influencers who are carnivore only. But again, I let them tell me that that's how they want to be. But even if it's animal only, I guess that's a very small percentage, but animal predominant. So the ones who are animal predominant and like really, really low carb, they may not be full carnivore, but they're ketogenic enough with this less than 50 grams of carb from, maybe a fruit or a salad or something here and there. And again, ketosis is not the goal in itself. I'm looking for, did they achieve their metabolic goals? Did they get their glucose normal? Did they get off their meds? Did the BP come down, blood pressure? Are they losing inches from the waist? Are they getting stronger? As long as all of that's happening, I don't need to fuss over their ketone levels.
Okay, we've talked quite a bit now about what to eat, but let's get into the when to eat. And you mentioned fasting. There's a couple different areas there I want to get into, snacking and fasting. So let's start with snacking. For somebody that comes to see you, whatever diet they're going to embrace, is that something you try and get them to eliminate pretty early on?
Yeah, so I like to think of myself as like a Google Maps or a guide or navigation assistant or an educator. I don't like policing people saying you will now stop snacking because I say so. What I do instead is I've given my patients access to a video course. It's a nutrition and lifestyle video course that I made, and it's got chapters, it's got quizzes, and it explains to them visually what it means inside the body when they snack. Is like we were talking a few minutes ago, is every time you eat, the body releases insulin to store fuel. And if you're eating from morning to night, energy abundance, you're telling your body, if you're eating 6 to 8 times a day, small, frequent meals, that's 6 to 8 messages to the entire body: store fuel, store fuel, store fuel. You're getting very little time without that insulin message going in the system. And so I leave it to them as a choice. Now, most people watch that video and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I didn't know I was doing that. I thought I'm supposed to be eating all day. That's what people said. And there are a couple of reasons why people eat small, frequent meals. One is that it's been prescribed by their nutrition expert, or it's been prescribed by their doctor. Why? Because they might have been given a certain diabetes prescription that makes the blood sugar crash too low if a meal is missed. And so the doctor is trying to prevent side effects of low glucose by making them eat, which is really backwards. It's completely messed up to do it like that because diabetes is a problem of high glucose. It's only a problem of low glucose because of the medication. And overeating or overexposure to food was one of the drivers of this problem. And now we're adding more food on top of that. So how's that person ever going to escape out of this, vicious cycle? So I give this information to the patient. And then the minute their eyes open, most people see this common sense to this. And they're like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to club my snacks with my meal. If I wanted to have this mid-meal fruit or something, I'm going to put that with the meal, either the previous or the next one, and keep it there. And then they realize, oh, but I'm so full because I'm prioritizing protein. I'm going to knock off some carb from that bigger meal so that I don't feel so stuffed. And so by themselves, with their own awareness of hunger and fullness, they end up reducing snacks. They end up reducing the, overeating portion size at the meal and holding on to that protein. So it's not a calorie fight between me and them.
As you talk about that situation with the doctor where they may be telling them to have snacks because of the drugs they're on, I can see as you talk about that, the importance of working with somebody like you as they go through this. Because if you're on medication and you're metabolically broken and you've been this way for a long time and you start to bring the carbs down, but your medication is targeted at the old lifestyle, you can run into problems that way as well.
You could be in danger. You could face a very low glucose reaction. So you need to work with someone who knows that you're doing this. Your blood pressure can crash. So I see that too. Your sodium can come low. You can start getting cramps from electrolyte losses. Keto flu, that's another one. So just feeling nauseous and weak and low energy. So you may actually need to keep an eye on the blood pressure and replace electrolytes, especially salt and magnesium. So there's a lot that can happen. I mean, if it's a metabolic disease that affects the entire body and you're flipping it within days by making powerful nutrition changes, no doubt a doctor or some qualified professional needs to be helping you through it if you've been on lots of prescription drugs. Yeah.
All right, let's move into fasting. We'll start with intermittent. I know for you, reading your book, that this is a later thing, at least depending on the person. When does that come in? And then what do the early stages of that look like?
Again, people hear now because they know what I do. They're like, oh my God, she's going to make me fast. And that's not how it works. We hold on to that as a reserve treatment. It's not something we prescribe to everyone. It needs to be done like a prescription in my mind. You're very strongly changing insulin signals when you fast. So if you're not careful, you could, interfere with their physiology, and it's not ideal then if you're doing it with, let's say, improper protein intake, or if you try fasting from a high carb intake. This is where people come in and say, oh, I tried fasting. I know you're going to tell me to fast, but it doesn't work for me. I had a terrible experience. Most times when I go into that history, I can find problems in those 4 lifestyle areas, what I call the 4 wheels of the lifestyle car. I find issues. I'm like a mechanic in that sense. I'll do the diagnostic on each lifestyle area. And in my checklist, I'll find, oh, this is why your fasting didn't go well for you. This is why, this is why. And so we don't use it as a magic wand. It's something to use in case you did everything you could with nutrition, sleep, stress management, exercise, and you didn't quite get all the results you were looking for, especially in my population, which might be vegetarian, might have that slightly higher carb intake than a ketogenic range. They're in this 80 to 100. So there is that daily carb that's coming in. That person might have a little bit of belly fat that's not gone, a little bit of fatty liver, triglycerides are not coming down, diabetes is not fully getting reversed. We may need to add this 5th element of intermittent fasting in that situation. And when they reach there, because we've done it in the right sequence, they're already feeling full, they're not hungry, and they're waiting for fasting. They're asking me, can I please fast? And then it becomes a safer and more pleasant experience.
By the sounds of it, with the patients you're working with, you're not recommending longer fasts, say 2-3 day fasts, water fasting. But for somebody over time, if they become metabolically healthy, how do you feel about that as a periodic tool?
Again, what duration is right for each person? We start with 16 hours and keep watching those glucose levels, especially for someone who has diabetes. It's an easy measure of how much fasting do we need. Someone who's doing it purely for weight loss, we just have to sort of play it out and try and get them into the 36-hour fast so that they actually get into fat burn, and give that a couple months to see how well it goes, maybe twice a week, a 36-hour. Once they've achieved their goals, and this is me, right? I don't have a disease that I'm trying to reverse. I played around with all the combinations. My maximum fast was 116 hours, like just short of 5 days. And I did it as an academic exercise. I wanted to know what I was prescribing. I've done a couple of the 48s, I've done the 72, and then I pushed to see what's my threshold. And that way I know what I'm prescribing. And for the periodic fasting that some people do, like once a year, a water only 72-hour autophagy inducing, like an anti-cancer fast, I have no problem with that. Once you've achieved your goals, you don't need to be fasting all the time. I'm more interested in helping you maintain muscle. It's very difficult to build muscle as we age when we're in a nutrient deficit. We want to be giving that anabolic stimulus. We want to give that muscle growth stimulus. So we want to nourish the body well, train well. And so I would like to see the person eating sufficient protein rather than over fasting when they don't need it. And then they can do these once a year longer water fasts just for the, for the cleanse benefits. But, still more data needed to know what anti-cancer properties it has. But the concept of autophagy is very fascinating. So I think it's fine to do a long fast once in a while.
Are there any specific supplements you recommend to somebody who is insulin resistant that can help them get back quicker?
No, I haven't seen enough strong data there beyond just replacing what's deficient in terms of iron, B12, and D. A lot of people do try and use supplements, but I haven't seen a direct correlation that here, this supplement reduces insulin resistance. Creatine for helping muscle and to, there's so many other benefits we're looking at now in terms of giving creatine. So that's the one supplement additional that I might add. But other than that, I haven't found great studies to say that this micronutrient is what we were missing in terms of fixing insulin resistance.
Okay. What about for general health? You mentioned electrolytes before. We could tuck that into this category.
Yeah.
But
so
are there
magnesium,
any baseline? Yeah, you mentioned magnesium before too.
Yeah.
Other baseline supplements?
Not beyond the B12, the iron, and the D in terms of daily needs. I would give you, if you're not getting enough omega-3 in your diet, then we need to look at that as probably taking some omega-3. Especially the vegetarians, they probably should think about that. But again, the data is not strong. So we might do it because it makes us feel better, but we don't have perfect studies on this. These are nutraceuticals. They're not studied well. So if it's almost like, hey, if you're asking me and you want to take it, I'm not going to say no because I don't have proof that it's harmful. But is there strong evidence that an omega-3 supplement is beneficial or reduces cardiac risk? Not strong evidence. Again, magnesium, symptom-wise, if someone's feeling that, low energy or muscle weakness, cramps, insomnia, things like that, then we use the magnesium as well.
All right, before we leave the diet piece and move to the other factors, your 4 factors. Well, we've covered intermittent fasting, but the other 3, I want to talk about your diet specifically, which is different than a lot of the guests that are on the show. A lot of the people that come on here are keto with heavy meat, carnivore, low carb with heavy meat. I'm somewhere in that realm as well right now, but you're vegetarian.
Yeah.
So I think it's important we talk about how you structure your diet, what that looks like, because you're still prioritizing metabolic health and low carb.
Yes.
But you're sticking to a different paradigm than many in our world. So talk about that.
Yeah, and I would love to give hope to the vegetarians who feel a bit ostracized or demonized or feel like, where's my guiding light? What should I be eating? So I am just under 60 kilograms. And so for me, 1.2 is about a 75-gram goal. I would love to get higher than that if I can. And I'm about to intensify my workout routine and go a bit heavier in the gym. So I'm expecting I'm going to be hungrier because of that. And so I will up my protein as much as I can tolerate above that as well. But for me, it's like a whole box of tofu would be one meal, which gives me about 25 to 28 grams. That's one meal. I do 5 eggs with cheese as another meal. So that's like more than 30 grams when I add the cheese. If I'm hungry in between, I'll just eat like half a deck of cards worth of cheese, like maybe 6 ounces of cheese. I'll just munch on it. And then I also do like paneer. So the dairy Indian fresh cheese that comes from splitting milk. So I might do, instead of the tofu, I might do like a huge bowl full, like about 150 grams of paneer, which is another close to 25 grams of protein there. And I swap around with those. And if I'm all over the place traveling on the road and I don't know where I'm going to get this protein from, then I do a protein shake and 25 grams in that. Mostly I do a plant-based one, like it's a combo of brown rice, quinoa, and pea protein, unflavored, unsweetened. It tastes like chalk. It's not nice to drink. I could add some flavors to it, like some cilantro and some chili and some lime and, mint leaves, fresh mint leaves, and some like spices. But it's too much work. So I just shake it and I gulp it. Or I'll do a whey protein shake every now and then. But there was a phase when I was dairy free. So then I was off of the cheeses and the whey.
And eggs are a big part of your diet, correct?
Yeah, I can't do without the eggs. If things are tough, if I'm out and it's crazy, I might even do 8 eggs or 10 eggs a day.
Okay. And obviously, again, coming back to the typical guests on the show, sticking to low carb keto, it's a lot easier when you're including animal based foods. So for you, is it cultural reasons or health reasons? What is it that sways you to the vegetarian world?
Yeah, it's a lot more work when you're a vegetarian to try and figure this out. And when we're a family of 4 vegetarians with 4 different versions of liking what we eat, and all of us being vegetarian, is very interesting. The amount of creative things we have to think about. So it's mental work. Why do I do it? I used to eat meat till I was 15. I've grown up. I was born and raised in the US till I was 10, and then came to India, and then I moved back to America, and then I've moved back to India. So I've done like this hop couple of times. So I'm very comfortable with both cultures. So I don't have a taste aversion to eating animal protein, but I decided to stop just for animal welfare reasons. There have been times when I've craved protein in both pregnancies. I felt like I need better quality protein. And so that craving, I think that was my body telling me I need more protein. But it's more for cultural animal reasons that I don't. And I do have my concerns about just how animals are treated. I think we can do better with that. Maybe if there was an ideal world where I had my own farm and I had my own ranch and my own animals and I could be humane to them, then I do consider animal protein to be a far superior source, which is why I source really good, expensive eggs, from free range, cruelty free. They say cruelty free, but have I gone and looked at the hens myself? No. So what do, right? It's really hard, honestly, to live responsibly in this world that we are in. So it's more from that perspective that I avoid animal protein. But, to be honest, there would be, if I had to choose, if I was with my back against the wall, there's no food available, I either eat a loaf of bread or I pick up some animal protein. I think I'd pick the animal protein because I do value my health. And I think it's like there's an ethical, thing you have to deal with yourself, and you have to sleep well at night. But I don't think I would be okay stuffing a loaf of bread and not taking care of my health.
Okay, so coming back to the principles of the diet, prioritizing protein, bringing down the carbs, you've explained how you've done this as a vegetarian. It sounds like a ton of eggs. Somebody that is vegan.
Yeah.
I'm
hard.
assuming you must work with vegans. It's hard, but how do they go about doing this?
They do it. Yeah, I've worked with them. It's very tough. And, they get full. They get really full from the amount of fiber that comes in. They feel bloated sometimes, and they really struggle. In fact, one of them actually had so much gut problems, like just gut imbalance, and she couldn't tolerate more protein. As much as I was like, you need more protein to heal your gut, but my gut won't handle it. And I'm like, oh, gosh. But that was her belief system. So one thing is they're ending up using a lot of tofu, a lot of soy protein, and protein shakes. There's really nothing else. I mean, how many nuts and how many seeds will you eat? Vegetables, again, you eat them for the protein that comes in some high, like spinach, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, but they're so filling because of all the fiber. So they get bloated, they get full. So the protein shakes and the tofu are really all they have. It's hard.
One food category that is often tied to insulin resistance in our world is the seed oils.
Yes.
So talk about how you see a connection there if you do, and then are they something you avoid?
Yeah, as I was narrating that incident in 2013 where this gentleman refused to go on insulin, I didn't know about seed oils at that time. And actually, back then, I was even telling people to skip egg yolks, right? So we've all had these journeys of awakening where we realize, oh, egg yolks are not a problem. Take as many egg yolks as you eat eggs. So those journeys have happened. What happened with that gentleman was that by reducing his carbs and not me looking into his oils, I didn't look into his oils or fats at all, because I was still influenced by the saturated fat hypothesis back then. I thought we should be low fat, and the low carb thing happened later. So my prescription to him was to reduce carbs, and I did not interfere with his cooking oils. He was able to turn around a very large part of his diabetes. Did he get completely into remission? Did the diabetes fully go away? No. What was that? Was that the oils? Was that he hadn't put on enough muscle? Because he was a classic TOFI. He was a thin on the outside, fat on the inside. He had this belly fat. He was overall slim. So he had like sunken cheeks and like very skinny arms and legs, but a belly. And so was this residual diabetes coming from sarcopenia and being under muscled? I don't know. I've started to switch out people's cooking fats for about, I don't know, maybe 5, 8 years now. I've been telling them to get out of the seed oils, the refined oils. And we made a switch in our home. I mean, Jesse, I lived in America. I remember going and picking up canola oil because it had the lowest saturated fat. I would go look for the lowest thing on the label. And I dutifully did that, thinking I'm being a responsible home, providing for my home in this responsible way. So I've done that. And now I don't. And now we recommend ghee, coconut oil, butter, full milk cream, keep the cream in the milk. Don't go for the skim version. Please enjoy the full fat milk. And I don't think avocado oil is affordable in India, nor is the macadamia oil. That's too fancy and too bizarre for the Indian culture. So if someone really needs to stay in the seed oil, because cooking in ghee is very expensive. Okay. And by me giving the suggestion to you is, here are the cooking fats I advise, but me not insisting on it, getting people's carbs down, I'm able to get them to quite a reasonable level of health. Now, for someone who's persistently sick, we'll have to go into the oils. But these are the major cooking oils. And so if someone really has to stay in seed oils, then we'll look at peanut. It's maybe the least harmful one is peanut and maybe sesame. And that's about it.
Up until this point, we've focused heavily on proteins, getting good quality protein, bringing the carbs down. We're now touching on fats, and you've made it clear you're not fearing fats, but we haven't really talked about getting an abundance of fat through the diet. Mm-hmm. So for you, is it more focused on the other two macros and then the fat takes care of itself? Or do you like to make sure you're getting a certain amount of fat? Let's bring fat in.
Yeah, I like how you put that question. I think I let fat take care of itself. I'm not prescriptive when it comes to the fat. People are mentally fearing fat anyway. So I'm just making it an okay macro for now, because by swapping out the carbs and the proteins, we're making enough progress. When they start asking about fats, I'm like, take in fats to satiety. If you have increased your protein well, into the target range and you're still hungry, take fats for satiety, right? But I'm not tracking and asking them to reach a certain number or grams of fat. I think they're doing okay, and I've not had to chase that as a target.
All right, let's move into the next wheel of the lifestyle car, sleep. We haven't talked about this yet. How does that tie into metabolic health?
2 ways, the most common ways. I mean, there's so many, but I'll talk about the top 2. One is shorten sleep duration. So sleeping less than 6 hours a day, which happens a lot in the Indian culture. People are working, they're burning the candle on both ends. They're staying up late. They're unfortunately scrolling on their phones and, doing social media stuff, or working. They're actually delivering, and they have clients all over the world, and it's a 24/7 economy. So they're not sleeping, and they're carrying all this into the bed. They're just not getting a wind down period. Like as of right now, I should be wearing my blue blocking glasses right now because it's way past sunset. It's 8:40 at night, so it's pitch black outside, and I've got this giant light blasting my face, right? So, and I'm guilty of it, right? I mean, I'm on this call and I'm not wearing these. But so quality and quantity both are getting affected by our lifestyles. And the final thing in sleep that is very problematic and underdiagnosed, I almost feel like Indians are more prone to it at smaller body frames and even normal body BMIs, is sleep apnea, where they don't have to be very overweight, but just maybe a smaller skeleton, smaller jaw, Maybe, I don't know if height has something to do with it. I'm not an expert in the anthropometry of this, but there's a huge amount of undiagnosed sleep apnea that I'm catching. And I do it based on asking. I ask their daytime sleepiness. I ask about whether they wake up fresh. And there's a whole set of questions to screen for this. And when I check for sleep apnea, 97% of the time I catch it. It's there. Like 3% of the time it comes back as a normal result. So this actually, all of these things worsen insulin resistance. If you have short sleep, light sleep without good circadian rhythm, and broken body clocks, that ruins your insulin resistance, or it ruins your insulin sensitivity. And sleep apnea can worsen insulin resistance. So that's 3 ways that I'm always looking for.
So when you do a subjective questioning of a patient, did you say that 90+% of the time you'll catch something you'll see objectively with, say, a sleep study?
Yeah, we ask them to do a level 2 sleep study at their home. So in India, it's easy to prescribe that. In the US, my patients have to get their PCP to prescribe, and usually it's a do-it-yourself level 1 sleep study. Very few people need to go for the level 3, which is where you check yourself into the hospital and you sleep in a sleep lab and they're monitoring you. That's a very expensive and tedious thing to do. So the level 2 is probably my preferred level of testing, where you get much more data and you can make a much more accurate diagnosis of sleep apnea.
All right, let's move into the next wheel. And we did talk about stress, but I want to make sure we cover management of that, which is this wheel. For somebody that comes to work with you, they're under a lot of stress chronically. What are the basic stress management modalities, say, you'll have them work on early on to help dissipate that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. Somebody may come into me for a medical problem, is diabetes, hypertension, obesity, polycystic ovarian syndrome, right? Their lipid panel. And they don't expect me to get into stress management because they're like, she's not going to talk to me about my mood or my feelings. But I know from my own journey how relevant it is to physical health, right? Mental health being relevant to physical health. And so I wanted to normalize it. I wanted to normalize the fact that it's okay for us to acknowledge that stress could be making you sick, and it's okay to take help. People feel a stigma sometimes, like it's weak or it's not good to take mental therapies. And I want to normalize that. So they might have felt that if I went and saw just one, out of the blue, a mental health professional, that's more stigma like more obvious. But if under the roof of my services, if I could provide a session with an in-house therapist, it might just count as, oh, there's one more session going on, and maybe they get the resources they need. So we have a therapist. She's a hypnotherapist and does a bunch of mind body guided meditative practices, inner child work, like I said, hypnotherapy. She's even into Reiki. She's a Reiki grandmaster. Whatever it takes to help someone get in touch with any negative emotion that's maybe unconscious, maybe subconscious, old trauma that's been stored away, and we don't know that it's interfering with my happiness or interfering with my rational decisions. Sometimes it's like self-sabotage, in fact. Like, I know I should do this for my health, but I just do something else and something takes over me. This is the classic way someone may describe it is, I don't know what comes over me. I just, lose the plot sometimes, and they feel frustrated about themselves. And I want to normalize that is, hey, that's how the human mind can work. It's okay to take help for that. So I sometimes try and package that within my own program so that people can get started without knowing what they need to do, is just show up for the session and it'll get guided from there. But there are so many modalities. So if they know what type of therapy they're okay with, then I can refer them out for those things. Some people are okay with reading a spiritual book. And it doesn't have to be about God. It could just be about getting in touch with yourself and knowing yourself better. Forgiveness is a big one. Huge healing that can happen, and letting go of bitterness helps the body to calm down. It's amazing how much sickness comes from chronic stress.
And to me, there's different aspects to this where if somebody's under chronic stress and say it's a relationship in their world or a job, assessing and getting to the root of those, and then the modalities as well. Because if we're just going to the modalities, whether it be meditation, Reiki,
Yeah.
but then we're going to a job we hate every day and that's stressing us out, to me, we need to address both of those to really have the change.
I agree with you. And that's the important balance is let's say it's my friend and let's say they are stuck in a situation that's really toxic. And I'm telling them this situation is so bad for you, just leave, right? That can sometimes hurt the person. It's almost like logically they know they should leave. It's obvious. And yet emotionally, they're somehow struggling. They're not confident. They're feeling addicted to this cycle of toxicity. There's something that keeps them stuck and trapped in that vicious, whirlwind of stress. So it's chicken and the egg, take the rational step of getting out of that situation. Or are there self-sabotaging emotions that are keeping you there, that are, not allowing you to take that obvious logical next step? And so I don't ever want to make a person feel like they're more crazy, like, oh my God, I'm so crazy. I'm not, it's so obvious, right? Because that can be the risk, is that they shouldn't feel bad. Like, why can't I get out of this? And so if you don't mind, I'm going to spend a minute on this. Is I got trained in another coaching technique. It came from the world of addiction. And the doctor who wrote the foreword in my book, he's one of the co-founders of this coaching technique that came from the addiction world. It's called motivational interviewing. And what it was meant for was people who struggled with substance abuse, who were falling away from society, could not come back to their jobs, could not come back to, meaningful relationships because of some addiction. And healthcare world workers had almost like written them off as they don't want to get better. They're just addicts. And they were called the most difficult patients. And fast forward now, we live in a world where, you have weight loss drugs that are being told can help with addiction. So we have now drugs that are being marketed to us as, treatments for addiction. But the coaching technique is very interesting for me. Is let's say someone's addicted to, or let's not use the word addicted to. Let's say someone is stuck in a toxic job, right? And if they would just leave, their diabetes would get better. And it's obvious, right? It's obvious to me as their doctor. It's obvious as their coach is, dude, friend, just leave the situation. Your stress would go away. If I say it like that, it sounds as though I know what's best for them and I'm telling them that. What I want to do in motivational interviewing is a coaching style, talking style, or listening style is, it looks like you're stuck. You obviously have two needs. You have one need that keeps you in this job. Maybe it's the money, maybe it's the security, maybe it's the embarrassment of not having a job that keeps you there, even though it's so bad for your mental well-being to be in that office. And there's another side of you that knows that this chronic stress is making your diabetes worse. And you have valid needs on both sides. That's why you're stuck, because you're trying to take care of both things. Right now, you feel like it's either the job or my health. I cannot have both. I cannot have a good work life and good health. That's not possible. And the job of the coach then is not to tell the person what to do, but to come into this conversation with this inherent trust. Is this client, this patient wants to do well in life. That's why they're talking to me right now. That's why we're in this space together, is because they want to thrive. They want to have a good life. They just maybe don't know how. Maybe they're stuck. And just by acknowledging that and saying, I see you, I'm not judging you. I see that you have these two needs. You're staying in this situation. When you just create that open, safe, non-judgmental space, oftentimes the wisdom kicks in for that person. And there's a technique in that, how you say it. So let me show you 2-3 different ways, if you don't mind.
Please.
Okay. So I'm going to say it 4 different ways. Okay. So you want better diabetes, but you're stuck in that job. Okay. That's one. Or you want better diabetes and you still stay in that job. Or you stay in that job and you want better diabetes. Or fourth one, you stay in that job, but you want better diabetes.
I like the last one.
The last one? So I'm glad you like the last one. The one right before that would be my top choice. And I'll show you both because it's hard for you to remember all four options.
To me, it was
that.
between the two. Yeah, the first two seemed like, no.
Yeah, those were horrible, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me tell you why the first two were horrible. And you instinctively knew that because you know you wouldn't want to be spoken to like that, right?
No.
So what's wrong with the first two? The first two put the goal first is you want better diabetes and you're stuck in that job. So I'm actually putting a question mark at the end and my voice is going up and you're stuck in that job. Like I'm judging you, like how dumb are you? Right? Or I start with you want better diabetes, but you're stuck in that job. The but. So if you know, I spend a lot of time in Chicago and there's Second City, this stand-up comedy called Second City. They have a book called Yes and. And the idea of improv comedy or stand-up comedy is if Jesse says to Roshani, the sky is blue, or no, if you say the sky is green, I'll say yes. And it's raining apples today. So yes and is you said something completely outrageous, but it's improv. So by me saying yes and, I'm keeping the conversation moving forward. I'm not dropping the energy. So and is very important compared to but, right? So the first two you didn't like because I was either sarcastic almost with the way I toned my voice, or I was putting but. Now this last two, you liked them better because it ended with the desired thing. So it's like musical, you know that game in childhood where there's a toy like a ball and the kids are sitting in a circle and the music's playing and someone's not looking and they have to turn the music on and off and whoever's stuck with the thing at the end is out.
Yeah.
So you're passing this thing on, you're passing the baton. So if I'm talking to you, you're most likely to remember the last thing I said because it's the most recent thing you heard. So do I want you, if you're my client, do I want you to hear the change thing that you're interested in or the stuck thing that you're stuck about?
The change.
Yes, because then you'll take that as your starting point to talk. So when I say you're stuck in that job, but you want better diabetes, the but is a bit of a down energy. But if I say the best choice would be you're stuck in that job, and you want better diabetes. Period. There's no sarcasm at the end. There's no, interrogation voice. I'm stating that I see you. And I'm ending with, and you want better diabetes. And I'm leaving the space open. Mic's yours. You get to speak. So if we come back to this whole topic of stress management, the inherent starting point as a therapist or as a coach or as a lifestyle doctor is I trust that this person has wisdom. They know what's best in their life. They know the reality once they leave my office or my appointment. They know the reality best about what they have to do there. So I have to bring in that expertise. This is a meeting between two experts. I'm the diabetes expert, and they are the expert in them, in their life. And honestly, a lifestyle disease is going to be solved mostly by them, not by me, in their life.
So it sounds like a big part of this is not talking down to the patient and trying to get them, while watching how you language things, to come up with the solution on their own.
Yes, and there are trainings. This is like lifelong training, how to do that, how to be more effective as that facilitator and a guide for them is the kinds of sentences you use is things like, how important might you rank this on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being least important, 10 being most important, and then they'll give you a number. And then you'll say, oh, that's a pretty high number. Why did you choose that number and not a lower number like a 2 or a 3? When you're doing that, they're spending the next few minutes talking about why this thing matters so much to them. Change, why change matters so much to them, because they came in stuck and you're trying to help them move more into change talk. And the statistics have shown, and they've done this, the clinicians who were from the addiction space, they recorded these interviews and they monitored these patients who had addictions who walked out. And they saw that if you have, like, let's say you have a 10-minute conversation, whatever minutes that were spent by the client talking about change, so the more minutes that the client spent talking about change, those were the ones that went out and actually made the change. But imagine if I, sabotage that meeting, that me as the smart doctor with the degree on the wall, I'm the one talking about change. Then it's less likely that they're going to change because I'm preaching at them. I'm not helping them talk about change, because we tend to like the sound of our own voice. We tend to like hearing our own thoughts aloud. And maybe my life was so muddled and hectic, and just coming into your, office, your consultation, I finally got time to think aloud about why this matters so much to me. And I get pepped up about why I want to change. I'm more likely to stick with that when I leave. So there's a structured, method of what types of tools you can use. There are books and there's 40 years of research gone into this training method.
The majority of the people tuning in today, unfortunately, aren't going to have an interaction with somebody who is skilled at this. But are there high-level points from the tactics you're talking about that they can use when talking to themselves to help facilitate change?
Yes, let's definitely give your listeners that today. Is if they feel stuck, then can they start writing down their valid needs? Is I eat cookies late at night. Okay, there's got to be a valid need why you're doing that. It helps me with my stress. It helps me with that boss that I can't talk back to. It helps me with this marriage that's not working out. And you have other valid needs, which is I want my diabetes to be fine. So put down your opposite needs that are fighting with each other. Is I'm having the cookies, they're helping me with emotional eating, but they're not helping me with diabetes. So put those valid needs down. Okay. Check your self-talk, diary, journal. Write down what you say about yourself, because whatever you say about yourself, it's going to be true. I am capable of doing this. You're right. I'm not capable of doing that. You make it right when you start talking like that about it yourself, because you're going to be the one who shows up. So monitor your own self-talk. And there's actually a piece in my book about this. I spent quite a bit of pages on this, is check your self-talk. And, the nutrition chapter, we talk about how clean is your diet. In the stress management chapter, I have a sub-chapter called How Clean is Your Thought Diet? What are the thoughts that you're feeding yourself? Because most of us don't even notice the amount of chatter that we're doing in our heads all day. I know I'm always a recovering neurotic person. I'm like perfectionist and always trying to be everywhere at the same time. And so sometimes when I listen to my thoughts, I'm like, oh my God, calm down. Like there's too many thoughts, like slow down. Listen to yourself. Are you limiting yourself? So another example, I always give up. I always give in when my friends take me out to dinner. I always end up eating the worst thing on the menu. I never stick to my diet. These words of always and never are lies. There's nobody who's always anything or never anything. So I'm being dishonest to myself about myself. I'm putting myself down. So when you start catching this, you might notice how your own thoughts are not helping you. And then there are methods that I talk about in the book, but it's also about identity. And I borrow this from James Clear. He has this book called Atomic Habits, a fantastic book. It really helped me. And the identity is, so there's this thing called sweet tooth, right? So sometimes patients will tell me, I don't have just one sweet tooth. I have 32 sweet teeth, all of them. I got all, right? The full set. And think about that. If you're saying that, is that your identity? How does that make you feel? It's okay to joke about it when you're being humorous, but if you're in a doctor's appointment, you've got uncontrolled diabetes and you're saying over there, I have 32 sweet teeth, you're making a statement about your identity. How does that make you feel? Does it make you feel good? Or does it make you shrink? Does it make you expand? Or does it make you feel small? And chances are you might find that I have some thoughts that make me shrink, and those are the opportunities. Is can you help yourself out talking to yourself more kindly? Like if this was your own best friend, would you talk to them like that? If this was a child, a small child who needs motivation, would you talk to them like that? And most of us know No, 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 I would not do that. Right. So this could be the starting point. Some people are able to self correct and get out of it. And some people, it's okay to find professional help and do this. I've taken years of professional help for myself. I would not have been able to articulate these things had I not done over a decade of self work. After that 2013 crisis in my own life, it's been over a decade of self exploration to know what these things are and how my mind works. And, same, you see it in other people and other people benefit from it. And so, you know what, there seems to be some truth here.
All right, we're going to move to the last tire, exercise. A lot of different types of exercise somebody can do. So let's tie it back to insulin resistance. Somebody trying to either prevent that or reverse it. What are the best exercises? And then what ones are actually going to push us the other way?
We should definitely talk about muscle building. And I talk about that first because, walking is great. Walking helps. It's a very powerful tool. It can be done by anyone. Even a sedentary person can get started with walking. It's low impact, low risk of injury. So we should definitely keep walking. But in terms of what really helps my patients turn diabetes around, it's strength training and building muscle. Why? Because muscle pulls 60 to 90% of your post-meal glucose. So if someone's thinking, I cannot be keto, I cannot be carnivore, I need to have a balance, I need to live a life that I can sustain as a way of eating, muscle becomes a very important piece to this. And athletes are able to go through a moderate amount of healthy carbs without any problem. So it's not that carbs are evil and it has to be down to an absolute zero number. But our bodies are not able to tolerate carbs as we have all these lifestyle factors plus muscle loss. And in India, we have this thing, I don't know if it's the case for you as well, is we have sometimes grandparents who had no diabetes their whole life. But then at 65, 75 plus, these grandparents got old age diabetes. Does that term exist in your world?
I mean, people are getting it left, right, and center at all ages, but not specifically. I haven't heard it that way.
So in India, they say it a lot is, it's almost like normal is, they only got the old age diabetes. And in my mind, now that I know about muscle, I'm like, that was the sarcopenia that kicked in. It's not like these grandparents are suddenly eating cookies and pasta that they never ate. Most likely, these grandparents have been eating the exact same way, right? They don't change suddenly and change their menu. It's sarcopenia, and muscle loss is really muscle falls off a cliff. Muscle mass falls off a cliff after the age of 60 plus. You're really losing muscle if you're not taking care of it. And to me, that's the explanation for this, increase in diabetes in the elderly. So I flip that and I take that to my patients is and Peter Attia has this, right? He talks about the centenarian decathlon. I like that paradigm is what do you want to be doing in the last 10 years of your life? And if you think there's anything active you would like to be doing and not just be frail, chair bound, bed bound, with a stick and not able to do things with your body. If you want to be active, you're going to have to reverse calculate, factor in muscle losses, and be building a much higher level of fitness now so that you have that bank and that buffer for the aging related muscle losses that are inevitable. But from a diabetes perspective, I have immediate selfish short-term reasons why I'm prescribing muscle building exercise is it helps us reduce the diabetes medicine burden because the glucose levels just start improving when all these muscles get activated, not just for the duration of the workout, but even 24 hours post-workout, you'll see that the glucose levels are better. Of course, the mood is better and sleep is better. So there's so many spillover benefits into those four wheels of the lifestyle car that we have to, help people get into strength training, get over the idea that just walks and yoga is going to be enough.
All right. So walking is good as a baseline. We want to put on muscle, have that buffer for blood glucose. What I was getting at with the other side is things like, say, marathon running, long distance cycling. Sean O'Mara, who's been on the show a few times, talks about how long distance cardio actually puts on visceral fat, which is a good proxy for poor metabolic health. So exercise as a whole is good, but when we push it to that extent, it can have a negative effect.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I would love to read that research. And I had a cardiologist come on my YouTube, and I asked him this: that does everybody need to be running marathons? And it was almost like I was teasing him with that question because he's the cardiology director for the Mumbai Marathon. So he's like the fitness director for the runs, and he's a runner himself. So it was almost like I was poking at his hobby, but he took it in stride. And he was like, look, I run marathons, but that is not an essential component of health. And what we settled on, which is what I agree, is the concept of like zone 2 is build your aerobic base. I don't think it's even natural. Or if I think from hunter-gatherer evolution, if you remember, we were talking about cortisol, that chase for the tiger or the escaping from the tiger or trying to hunt your prey, I don't think it went on for marathon level duration of running. Humans are not actually, I think, designed to be such prolonged runners as an animal. We were probably designed for more sprint and like short bursts of chases and escape needs. And the marathon concept or the ultra, I think these are more extreme sports, more hobby based. And if you love the extreme sport, okay, fine. But I don't think it needs to be part of a metabolic health prescription per se. Zone 2 is probably more than enough.
All right, as we wrap up here, let's talk about somebody adopting what we talked about today and their trajectory out of this. And obviously, it's going to depend on the person, how far down the line they are, what different modalities they're going to apply, and how strictly. But give us an idea. Somebody that comes to see you, starts to work on this, how quickly can they see changes in reversal of insulin resistance?
Within a week. I mean, if you start dropping your carbs, upping your protein, within a week, I see improvements. And within 2 weeks, not just glucose levels improving, but energy levels are going up. Some of them, I don't want them weighing themselves on the weighing scale so soon because it's probably a lot of water weight at that point, and I don't want to give them some false, excitement over water movement. So not the weighing scale, but just they feel less bloated, less puffy, like as though some swelling is leaving the system. They talk about it that way. And this we know is insulin resistance lowering, the water retention reversing itself, and this water that's under the skin in the wrong place, that starts to get corrected as they up the protein. So within 2 weeks, they're beginning to feel a lot better. The people who will struggle will be the vegetarians or the vegans whose gut may be still very inflamed. And that seems to be one of the tough stumbling blocks for some people if they have a very inflamed gut. But barring that, within 2 weeks, drastic improvements. So they really need to make sure they're working with their prescriber to change the medicines.
All right, Roshani, we're going to link up everything in the show notes, your book, your video course you talked about, social media. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Jesse, thanks for having me, and thanks for the work you do.
Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
Insulin is the bad guy. I can't say it any simpler than that. Yes, glucose is bad too. I'm not saying it's not. Insulin's worse. Insulin is associated with all of the disease.